Hey everyone, it's Necromancer 1040 here. So I got another deck profile for you guys, and this is one that I've kind of been taking some time to kind of build and put together. So kind of interesting. It was kind of an interesting kind of a deck I was putting together here. But I mean, you guys are no strangers to this deck. It's Thunder Dragon, so I'm gonna show you my spin on it. But without any further ado, let's get into it. So we're gonna start off with the typical three Thunder Dragon Darks. So if you don't know what he does, you discard him, you search another Thunder Dragon Dark from your deck, and if he gets sent from the field or he's banished, you get to search another Thunder Dragon Dark from your deck as well. So he's kind of useful. But this guy, Thunder Dragon Roar, he's really what gets your combos going. He basically allows you to you discard this card and then you can add one of your Thunder Dragon monsters from that for the Spanish or from the grave into your hand. So he's very useful in that sense. And if he's sent from the field to the grave, or from the field to the grave, or he's banished, you get to summon something from your deck. So he's very useful in that sense, and that's the reason why I'm using him at 3. I know this is a controversial pick, Thunder Dragon Hawk. The reason why I say it's controversial is I only use two copies of Thunder Dragon Hawk. Mainly because I don't know, he sits very comfortably at 2. I haven't had any problems with having him at 2. I mean, I see him when I need to see him. He's very searchable. But I can say he is one of the best Thunder Dragon monsters. If you don't know what he does, you discard one, or you discard him, and then you get to special summon a Thunder Dragon monster that's banished or in your graveyard. And if he's banished or he's sent from the field to the grave, then you get to shuffle your hand and then redraw as many. So, he's really useful. I use 2 Thunder Dragon duos. He's mainly just to basically chain block your opponent. Basically, you summon him out by banishing one line, 1 dark, and then that's basically 2 Thunder Dragons, and you're gonna get their effects just by paying the cost of his summon. But he does gain 300 attack, so he can juice himself up, and he can banish a card from the graveyard, and he's good all around. He basically pushes your plays, and he can become a pretty big beater overall. So yeah, that's why I use 2 of them. And he's also an Allure of Darkness target, which is in this deck. So he's very useful in a lot of senses. So yeah, this is the Thunder Dragon monster lineup. If you guys notice, I'm not using Thunder Dragon, the original Thunder Dragon. There's a reason for that. So yeah, I'll show you why. I use 3 Battery Man Solars. You have to use him in this deck. He's one of the better normal summons, even special summons. So that's the part about him. You don't have to hard normal summon him. You can special summon him. And he basically generates a token when you summon out another Thunder Dragon or another Thunder monster. So he's even more versatile than that. You can only use it once per turn, but obviously that's all you really need. So you can use it for your link plays or synchro plays, whatever you need him to be. So he's useful in that regard. And of course, 3 hand traps. I use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. I find it to be very useful to deal with any problem card on the field. I don't know, there's a monster I just can't contend with. I just drop Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit when I need to get rid of that monster, and it doesn't target, so it gets around a lot of problematic monster abilities. So yeah, you can use Ash Blossom if you don't want to use Ghost Ogre. To be honest, you can play around with the ratios with this, but I just found it to be useful at 3. So yeah, 3 Ghost Ogres. And this is the reason why I don't use Thunder Dragon, the original ones. I use 3 Thunder King, the Lightning Strike Kaijus. So The reason why I use him is because he mainly breaks boards. If your opponent has this really problematic monster you just can't get over, I don't know, maybe like the one Raid Raptor card that I forget its name, but it's basically unaffected by card effects. You can just get over that by kaijuing their that problematic monster. And same thing is with Radiant. Radiant isn't as big as Thunder King. That's the reason why I use Thunder King, because I normally summon Radiant to their side of the field, and then I summon Thunder King to my side of the field to just attack right over Radiant, so I can kind of break their board in that sense. But you'll see another card, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, which we do use in this deck. Overall, I find this strategy to be very consistent with the deck. It adds a lot more synergy as opposed to just the regular Thunder Dragons where you just discard the regular Thunder Dragon, you add 2 to your hand. I mean, that's nice. It's great for discard fodder, but it doesn't really do much else than that. And I mean, same thing can be said for Thunder Dragon Matrix, but I do use it in the side deck. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see that when we get there. I also use 2 Aloof Lupine. You may be wondering why 2. There are going to be instances where you don't have your ideal hand, where you don't have 1 Thunder Dragon in your hand. I mean, you'll always have a Thunder Dragon in your deck, but 3 is just a bit too much because you have to hard normal summon this guy. He can't be special summoned to get his effect. So yeah, basically, when you summon him out, you don't want to see another in your hand. So, I mean, you can also banish this guy to target one of your banished monsters and then add it to your hand. That's a plus, but it's usually after the fact, and it can't really do much for you now as opposed to his first effect. So that's why I only use 2. You don't want to see another one in your hand, for the most part. And I used the Light and Dark Dragon. So Black Dragon Collapse Serpent and White Dragon Wyver Buster. They're very straightforward. They basically summon each other out when they're destroyed. They're basically, if you don't get enough targets into your grave, this is just meant to be an easy summon. You just banish the 1 target you do have, and then you get an extra monster on board, and you can use it for link material or whatever you want it to be, quite frankly. Same thing goes for Black Dragon Collapse Serpent. So yeah, that's the reason why I use these 2. They're just very accessible. So that was the monster lineup, the main deck monster lineup. And I do use 3 Thunder Dragon fusions. That may be contrary to what I said, like you don't want to see 3. But when I was testing this deck out, for the time I was testing it, I normally never saw the 2 ratios when I put just 2 of them in the deck. Almost never saw them. So 3 is kind of better, in my opinion. So that's why I put them at 3. I mean, it's if you don't know what it does, it basically allows you to summon out your Thunder Dragon Titan or Colossus out quickly by shuffling or the require fusion materials that are either banished or from your graveyard. So that's the accessibility of it. And you can banish this card to search out another Thunder Dragon card. So yeah, that's very useful to have something in your graveyard that you can use later. And that's kind of the theme I've adopted for this deck, is how can I prepare for the next turn if this turn doesn't go right. So with that said, I do use 3 Allure of Darknesses. This is a staple for this deck. Thunder Dragons do have a bit of a draw problem, and this is kind of meant to remedy that problem. And so yeah, I mean, this is part of the reason why I use Radiant in this deck too, because he adds a little more consistency to the deck with Allure of Darkness. He's just another Allure of Darkness target, and he's a great board breaker as well. So that's why I use 3 Allure of Darknesses. And speaking of which, Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. So this also helps you break boards as well. What I was also thinking for this deck is my opponent's probably gonna try some strategy to lock me out or just make this unbreakable board. So I'm gonna try as hard as I can to break it. So this is part of the strategy I'm using. So in case if they do have protection effects that protect their monsters from being destroyed, you're going to get some kaijus into your hand if you do banish this card, and you summon a kaiju to your side of the field and your opponent's side of the field, which is a perfect super poly target if you set up your board correctly. And that's kind of what I've meant for this deck to do. Is super poly is in this deck, so you'll be seeing that pretty soon. So yeah, 2 interrupted kaiju slumber. 3 is a bit much because it's a once per turn effect. You don't want to see more than 1 in your hand. 1 mind control. I have the other mind controls in the side deck, but obviously you can switch them out as you need them. It's for the most part, more copies are better in the main deck, but for the purposes of this video, I'm just using 1. Another one of the one-ofs, instant fusion, gets out Kaminari attack and Thousand Eyes restrict. Reasoning, it's basically a free summon. Since your Thunder Dragon's levels are all over the place, it's hard for your opponents to predict what they're going to call correctly. So yeah, it's basically a free summon. And if they do guess correctly, you get a Thunder Dragon in your graveyard. So you're basically helping to protect your Colossus or Titan. So yeah, that's a plus. And another is Pot of Desires, just more draw power, because this deck does need it. I don't want to... I did and I didn't want to use more than 1 Pot of Desires, because when you do use Desires, you do kind of cut into your resources, and you kind of really need your resources in this deck, especially, because this deck does burn through your Thunder Dragons pretty quick. So that's why I just opted to use 1 Pot of Desires. Just for that draw power, but not to drain my resources as heavily. So yeah. So the last of the one-ofs is Scapegoat. So this is kind of like you're going second, making sure you have another turn, like so your opponent doesn't OTK you for 1. And if your first turn doesn't go as quite as you wanted to, you at least have this to back as a backup. So you can easily go into Saryudra, and you can set up for other link plays if you want. So yeah, this it's a combo enabler in itself. So yeah, that's why I want to use for this deck, Scapegoat. Super Polymerization, speaking of which, here it is. Can help you summon out any of your Thunder Dragon fusion monsters and just basically use your opponent's fusion materials to summon them. I do use Starving Venom Fusion Dragon in this deck, and yeah, it's overall great. 1 copy. I do have the other sided in the deck, but we'll get to that. And then Golden Sarcophagus allows you to banish something from your deck. Very useful to just get your combos going. It's one of your best combo enablers, so it's a staple for a Thunder Dragon build. If I could use more, I would. So yeah, but 1 for the moment. And then the last card in the main deck, the 1-trap Skill Drain. Obviously, this kind of foils a lot of your opponent's strategies. You can use Soul Drain to stop your opponent's activated effects, but that could also land on you as well and kind of ruin what you have. So I think Skill Drain is overall like the better pick for my kind of rendition of this deck. But use it as you want. So yeah, that wraps up the main deck. So we're going to go into the extra deck. Here's where it gets a little controversial. Well, maybe not so much. I did kind of design this deck with the ban list in mind. So knowing Konami is probably going to hit Thunder Dragon Colossus in some way, I decided to relegate it to 1 because I did want to be mindful of the ban list. And this deck is kind of meant to survive the ban list in that regard. So I use 1 Colossus. I don't think they're going to hit Titan, but I do use 2. I never see myself going into the 3rd Titan, and for the most part, I just see myself recycling one of my Titans. So that is the 3rd Titan, essentially. Colossus helps you shut down search abilities from your opponent's side, and Colossus basically pops a bunch of things on your opponent's side or destroys them whenever a Thunder Dragon effect is activated from the hand by discarding it. They both can protect themselves by banishing thunder monsters from the grave, and that's perfect, so you can trigger off other effects, and then you protect your Thunder Dragon Infusion monsters. So all in all, they're fantastic cards, and I can see why Konami's hitting them. So yeah, but this is the reason why I'm using the ratios for these cards I'm using right now. Super Poly target, Starving Man and Fusion Dragon. He's great. You just need 2 generic dark monsters, and once per turn you can target 1 level higher monster your opponent controls until the end phase. The card's name becomes that monster's original name, and then replace the effect of that monster with the original effects. So yeah, he's great. So he's kind of like a weird copycat, and yeah, he's just great out to your opponent, to your opponent's responses. Mud Dragon the Swamp, he's just another generic Super Poly target, so that's why I included him. In case there's a monster you can't get over, that's another way you can out the opponent's board. Just use Super Poly, Mud Dragon the Swamps. You just need 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types, and that's kind of easy to do. If you have a dark monster on your side of the field, you basically kaiju them with Radiant and then activate Super Poly. And then you basically take their monsters and you can summon out Mud Dragon. So that's why I use the kaijus, so they can kind of synergize with this strategy too. And yeah, that's ultimately the game plan. So your instant fusion targets, Kaminari Attack and Thousand Eyes Restrict. Thousand Eyes Restrict is just mainly meant to swipe something from your opponent's side of the field. He does target, so do keep that in mind. But he allows you to swipe something from your opponent's side of the field, which can take advantage away from your opponent. Kaminari Attack is just another easy summon with instant fusion. That's just it. I mean, you can use Outer Entity Azathoth in tandem with this, but you might have to go out of your way. But he's just another body on board with instant fusion. So yeah. Now for the links, we use Nightmare Phoenix. He's just meant to destroy any annoying floodgate or back row that may be on the field. So yeah, he's very self-explanatory, and he helps you draw a card. I use Hippo Shinigami. He's great. 2 light monsters. This deck has a bunch of light monsters in this deck, so he's not hard to get out. And if he's destroyed on the plus side, you can search any light monster. Well, not any. Target one. Any light monster in your grave and add it to your hand. So yeah, that's basically your hand traps. You can bring back Ghost Ogre to your grave, or you can bring back Thunder King, and you can kaiju your opponent again. Or you can just bring out a light Thunder Dragon monster into your hand. It's great. That's why I use Hippo Shinigami. He's 2 light monsters, easy to get out. I use Reprotagus for attribute and monster type manipulation. Yeah, usually I just use this. So I summon him to. Normally, when I kaiju something on their side of the field, I put this like right behind a link zone the opponent's using, and then I summon Reprotagus to point to that monster, the kaiju I just summoned to their side of the field, change their attribute or their type, and then basically use Super Poly to get out Mud Dragon. So he's really useful in that regard. And so yeah, that's a normally great combo that goes off. Nightmare Phoenix, he's just great. 2+ monsters with different names. Discard 1 card, then target 1 card on the field and return it to the deck. If this card was co-link when the effect was activated, you can draw 1 card. You can only use it once per turn. And while any co-link monsters or nightmare monsters are on the field, for your normal draw 1 card for each different type among them. So yeah, you know what Nightmare Unicorn does, and so that's why I kind of use him. So he kind of just bounces things to your hand, and so yeah, he's just easy to get out. And on top of that, 2 big link monsters of the deck. Saryuja Skuldred. He's mainly meant to be used for, in a way, draw power, yeah. But basically reshapes your hand. If you don't want certain cards in your hand, you can just send them back into the deck. He's also a summon engine as well, and he can buff up your monsters as well. So he's great all around. Borolo Dragon, he breaks boards, and he's just kind of nasty to contend with. Yeah, I use them for almost every deck. It's crazy to think about it. But yeah, that's why I use these 2. And now another interesting pick that I chose, Curious Lightsworn Dominion. I don't see many people using Curious, and so I thought he'd be kind of interesting to use. So you can send something to from your deck to the grave, and basically, if you need more Thunders in your grave, you can do that with Curious. And at the end, he does mill like 3 cards from the top of your deck to your grave, so you can get more um, Thunders into your grave that way. And he's overall great. He's not hard to get out, and you definitely have the means in this deck to get him out. I've got him out plenty of times, but he also synergizes with the extra deck, or not the extra deck, the side deck options. So yeah, Curious is great, and it's kind of, I don't know, in my opinion, it's kind of odd not a lot of people use him in this deck, but that's why. And then Borreload Savage Dragon. Since we do use Saryudra and we do use Borreload Dragon, it makes sense to use Borreload Savage Dragon so you can get a bunch of counters on him and or negates, and then he just pumps himself up and he can get huge and break boards. So yeah, he's overall great, and you can make him with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit and another Thunder Dragon monster. So yeah. So now we get into the side deck. And here's where you'll see poor Thunder Dragon, the original Thunder Dragon. So like I said, he doesn't do as much as the Kaiju engine does for you. That's why he's relegated to the side deck. But if you want to run a more pure version of this, you can run Thunder Dragon, the 3 copies of Thunder Dragon in this deck. And you can use Thunder Dragon Matrix in this deck. I mean, if you don't know what Thunder Dragon Matrix does, he basically gives your Thunder monsters an extra 500 attack. If he's banished, you can add a banish or sent from your field to the grave. You can add another copy of him. I just used 2. 3 is a little excessive. You see a little bit too much of him than you want. So that's why I use this kind of card ratio. Yeah. And I do use Treeborn Frog. I do use when I do side him in, he basically is the Curious Lightsworn Dominion target. So I send him to the grave and I have him set up for my next standby phase, and he's just an easy summon out. So he's easy for link material. That's why I use him. I wanted to get Chaos Dragon Levianeer, but this is my closest substitute to it. Banish 1 light and 1 dark monster. You can special summon from your graveyard by sending 1 light and 1 dark monster from your hand to the graveyard. And when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you target 1 level 5 or higher dark type dragon type monster from your graveyard and special summon that target. So this synergizes perfectly with the Collapse Serpent and the Wyvern Buster in your main deck. So that's the closest substitute I could think of it, and he does synergize well with them. So that's why he's kind of in the side deck. But I do want to main deck him, considering it. Okay. So these are the other 2 mind controls. You can side them in as you need. Great card. That's why I have the other 2 copies here. Yeah, it just wipes monsters from your opponent's side of the field, takes advantage away from them. And this is kind of the other card I use to break boards. I use 3 Dark Ruler No Mores. I kind of side at least 1 copy when I do go into a matchup because I want that extra board breaking capability. This is probably the least convenient of your board breakers because it doesn't really generate advantage for you. It just enables you to set up. It basically stops your opponent's plays, but it doesn't summon out monsters for you, if you get what I'm saying. It doesn't start your combos, is what I'm trying to say. But I do use 3 copies. They're going to be those decks, you know what I'm talking about, the ones that just prevent you from playing, and this can come in real handy for that. So yeah, 3 copies. There's the other I really can't talk today. The other copy of Super Polymerization. Side it in as you need it. It's a great card. But I just use it at one. Oh, there's the car again interrupting my video. Sorry, I live by a very busy street. But yeah, 1 copy of Super Polymerization. Side it in as you need it. It's a great card. And to wrap up the side deck, Galaxy, Cyclone, and 1-for-1. So yeah, 1-for-1 is mainly meant to work with your Treeborn Frog plays and your Thunder Dragon Matrix plays. So that's why I use this. When I am siding them in, I definitely side this in. And Galaxy Cyclone, basically used for back row destruction or just destroy that annoying floodgate you need to get off the field. And it's great because you can banish it from the graveyard and destroy another spell or trap on the field. So it has a dual purpose. And yeah. So that wraps it up for the side deck. This isn't really like another side deck, but these are just kind of options you can use. So I'm just going to show all the options I'm using, the alternatives you can use for this deck. You can use Cypher and Lord Omega. You do banish a lot, and yeah, he basically helps you recycle your banished cards. Some Summon Summoner. A lot of you may be wondering, like, why aren't you using this in your main deck? Why aren't you using this in your extra deck? Low-key, I think he's not that great because he requires his effect only goes off during your opponent's turn, and that you basically invested 2 monsters that into another monster that's not going to really do much for you, and just it's going to sit there until your opponent's turn. And yeah, he just summoned something from the grave, but keep in mind it's during your opponent's turn, so there's a high likelihood it's going to be destroyed. I know people are going to disagree with me on that, but I've kind of tested with it, and it hasn't really worked out. But Giant Rex, that's another one of your Golden Sarcophagus targets in case of the ban list does destroy his deck. We at least have Giant Rex to summon him out. I would use Dimension Shifter. Yeah, it's almost like a Macrocosmos in their areas. Helps you generate your plays on the first turn. You can easily you can use Fissure or Macrocosmos as an easy substitute for this, and just use 1 copy. But this is mainly meant to be used to generate more advantage off of your banish effects. So that's why I use these as possible alternatives to what I use. And then the 3 copies of Called by the Grave. And you may be wondering, why don't I use this in the main deck? But what I've often observed is that this deck really thrives off of combo enablers. When you put Called by the Grave in this deck, it's not doing much else for you when you aren't negating a hand trap or a monster's effect from the grave. It just kind of sits there and doesn't generate advantage for you. So when someone does hand trap me, I'm kind of thinking, well, instead of Called by the Grave, what other card could I use in place of Called by the Grave to generate me that combo enabler that I wanted to do before I got hand trapped, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking, yeah, I'm gonna get that 1 card negated by a hand trap, but I got this other backup instead of Called by the Grave, which is going to enable this combo star that I want to go off. So yeah, that's why I kind of relegate this Called by the Grave to as possible alternatives. It's not a bad card, but I think this deck thrives more off of combo enablers. So that's why. And yeah, with that pretty much wraps up my deck profile. I mean, here are the other alternatives. You can always use a third Thunder Dragon Roar. And of course, you can definitely use the other Thunder Dragon Fusion monsters, but I did build this deck in mind with the ban list, so that's why I didn't really include this in this deck. But with that kind of wraps up my deck profile. I hope you guys really enjoyed this deck profile. I really tried to think of how this deck would survive through the ban list, and yeah, I made my picks accordingly with that. And so I wanted to upload this before the ban list so I could kind of give my take on how this deck would survive the ban list. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll try to make more deck profiles for you, and stay tuned for other videos. And if you want to help support content on my channel, you can do so on Patreon. I normally post it on the link that I do in the same with the same description in every video that I do, but you don't have to. It's just something if you want to. But I really appreciate all your support, and thank you so much for watching my content. I'll catch you in another video, and bye.